In Muqaddimah Hadramiyyah, in our last lesson, and we have completed the Muqaddimah. The Muqaddimah yani of Muqaddimah Hadramiyyah. So, for the sake of those who are asking the meaning of Muqaddimah, and I think it is important for us to differentiate between when we say Muqaddimah and Muqaddimah Hadramiyyah. In Muqaddimah Hadramiyyah is the name of the kitab. We have completed Muqaddimah Hadramiyyah, yani the introduction of the book, yani Muqaddimah Hadramiyyah. So in our last lesson, for those who have notes, we have completed page 1, and basically we spoke about the Basmalah, we spoke about Hamdalah, and I spoke about Bara'atul Istihlal. The author speaks about certain things about the knowledge of fiqh in the Muqaddimah. And then lastly, he made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, فَأَسْأَلُ اللَّهَ الْكَرِيمَ أَنْ يَنْفَعَ بِهِ. And this is important. Dua in the Muqaddimah, the author makes this dua. He said, and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah makes this kitab a reason for benefit. That all who read and study this particular kitab will attain any benefit from it. وَأَنْ يَجْعَلَ جَمْعِي لَهُ خَالِصًا لِوَجْهِ الْكَرِيمِ. And lastly, he makes dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless him with ikhlas for his compiling of this particular kitab. So from here, what we can benefit is that our ulama last time, when they write books to attain the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not because of any business, or not because of making money, but this is one of the reasons that a person attain the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All those who study this kitab, the rewards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will also give to the author. Like currently we are learning this kitab, mashallah, Allah will bless the author also the rewards of his completion, where people gets this benefit. So now inshallah we will go into the book itself. After the Muqaddimah, now we have come into the page 2. So he mentioned the rulings of purification. In Arabic we call it At-Tahara. So this is the first chapter that you will find in books of fiqh, that our scholars speaks about Tahara before as-Salah. Because why? Because you are one is not be able to perform the prayers if he does not perform the purification. So that is why our scholars always they place purification, the chapter purification, before the chapter of prayers, because this is a condition to the validity of prayers. So we need to understand how to purify ourselves before we perform our prayers, because purification of ourselves is a condition to the validity of our prayer. And if we do not understand the rulings pertaining to tahara, then our prayer will not be valid, or we do not perform any of the rulings within the tahara, or the obligatory acts within tahara, our prayer will not become any valid. So that is why it is wajib upon every Muslim to study any knowledge of fiqh, and to study the chapter of purification. So inshallah ta'ala, now we will begin with this particular chapter. So we have entered the first chapter. The word tahara in the Arabic language, basically it means something that is clean and pure. So in Arabic we say at-tahara, it is an-nadhafa. An-nadhafa meaning something that is clean, or something that is pure. This is basically the meaning of tahara in the Arabic language. The meaning of tahara in Islam, we say it is raf'ul hadas wa izalatun najas. Raf'ul hadas wa izalatun najas. That is to remove the ritual impurities, and izalatun najas, yani to cleanse ourselves from filth. أو ما في معناهما أو على صورتهما. this is any basically the definition any of tahara as mentioned by Al-Imam An-Nawawi. Yani he mentioned أو في معناهما أو صورتهما. So there are two main things in this particular definition. Number one, it is removing ritual and impurities. Number two, it is cleansing any ourselves from filth. And then comes أو ما في معناهما. Inshallah later I will speak about this. But basically what the author is saying from this particular definition is that it has a link to the first two. Because there are certain things that does not lift major impurity or minor impurity, or it does not cleanse filth, but it takes the place of one of the two. For example, like tayammum, if a person cannot find water, then he has to perform tayammum. By the tayammum, he can perform his prayers. But tayammum is not something that lifts impurities. Meaning, if a person is not in a state of wudu, and he takes tayammum, the tayammum does not lift the impurity. But it is just a rukhsah. Meaning, it is a concession that since you cannot find water, Islam will give you a way out, that you can use tayammum. So although we say that it does not lift any impurity, but it carries that meaning which enables you to perform your prayers even though you are in a state where you cannot find any water. It becomes the means that you can remove the state of impurity. But before I go on, I think I have to explain what is the meaning of raf'ul hadas. So inshallah we'll go slowly inshallah. Go back to this definition. Number one, we have raf'u hadath. So basically it means to lift an impurity. Impurity in Islam, it is something that cannot be seen. It is something that cannot be seen. This is the meaning of hadath. We have the term hadath. Hadath is something that is present within insan, but it cannot be seen. But it is understood. Let me give you an example. For example, a person went into the toilet. And after he leaves the toilet, meaning he, urinate, for example. Now he is in a state where he got no ablution. Even if he has ablution, now the ablution has been nullified. So we say he is in a state of minor impurity. This is called hadasul asghar. Hadath, there are two types. We have akbar and we have asghar. We have the major ritual impurity, and we have the minor ritual impurity. If a person is in a state that he has no wudu, meaning he is in a state of minor ritual impurity. But when you look at this particular person, you cannot detect whether he has wudu or he does not have wudu. So, but it is assumed, it is understood that since you have performed a particular act that makes your ablution nullified, then automatically you are in a state of minor ritual impurity. Likewise, if a person does any sexual intercourse with a wife, for example, he comes into a state of major ritual impurity. So we say he is in a state of hadath akbar or hadath asghar. The meaning of hadath, it is something that is imaginary, that occurs within any insan. We say he is amrun i'tibari. It is something that cannot be felt by the senses, but can be understood. So when we speak about lifting this state of impurity, this is what tahara is all about. Tahara is raf'u hadath. It is about how are you able to lift this impurity. This impurity that although you cannot see this impurity with your naked eyes, but it is something that can be understood. It is something that is existent within you. So in Islam, when we speak about removing ritual impurities, we speak about two types of ritual impurities. Number one is the major ritual impurity, that is termed as hadathul akbar, And number 2, it is minor ritual impurity. When it comes into the minor ritual impurity, when we perform any our ablution, that impurity is lifted. So that is why the Arabic term any rafa, it is lifted. Yani this hadas any that is present in us, the moment any we perform any our wudu, our ablution, that particular hadas that is existent any within us is removed. It is lifted any from us. That is why when we make intention for wudu, we say nawaitu raf'al hadasil asrar. I make any the intention to remove hadath al asrar. Yani this ritual, minor ritual impurity from me. So to remove the minor ritual impurity, it is by the wudu, by ablution. To remove the major ritual impurity, it is by bathing. It is by any bathing. So this is any the meaning of raf'u hadath. I hope any it is clear, inshallah. And for your information, if you got any questions, inshallah, you can write any your question in the comments. Later, inshallah, we have Q&A, inshallah. And also, those who are inside in our WhatsApp group, also you can post any your question in your WhatsApp group. So I will leave the Q&A, inshallah, at the end of the session. So we start off with explanation. Inshallah, if there is any doubts, you can ask. No problem. So the first part is raf'u hadath. The second part of tahara is izalatun najas. Izalatun najas. Yani, the chapter of tahara will teach you how are you able to cleanse yourself from filth. And in our madhab al-Imam Shafi'i, filth, there are 3 types. Mughalladha, mutawassita, mukhaffafa. All this inshallah and you will study. But just I need to give you an overview. Mughalladha, anything that comes from the dog and the swine. Then we have mutawassita. Mutawassita, there are many. Other than the mughalladha and the mukhaffafa are mutawassita. The mukhaffafa is only one, the urine of a baby boy who has not reached 2 years of age, who only drinks the mother's milk. The urine is considered to be mukhaffafa. Only for baby boy, not baby girl. Based on the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, pertaining to the difference between the male child and the female child. So this is point number 2. We will speak about how to cleanse ourselves and what are the things that we can use from water and stones and tissue and so on and so on and so forth. The third part of this definition is aw ma fi ma'nahuma. Yani the author mentioned, or anything that carries the meaning of raf'u hadath and izalatun najas. I give the example of tayammum. If a person does not have water to live the state of minor ritual impurity, then he can perform the tayammum. So here we say it is part of the meaning of raf'ul hadath, but in reality it does not remove the minor ritual impurity. And then aw ala suratihima, ma fi ma'nahuma aw suratihima. Anything that carries its meaning in terms of removing ritual impurity or cleansing oneself. Like for example, if a person use stones in his tinja, so this is something that is forgiven by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In reality, it does not make you clean, but it is something that is forgiven by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Aw ala suratihima, here it means the sunnahs. For example, bathing on Friday. Bathing on Friday is part of tahara, but it does not remove any state of ritual and impurity. But it is a sunnah for you to bathe. So here we say it is like the removing of major ritual impurity in terms of bathing, but it does not remove major ritual impurity, because why? It is something that is considered to be a sunnah. Likewise, pertaining to a person who renew his wudu. Renewal of wudu does not leave any state of ritual impurity, but it is a sunnah. It is a sunnah that if a person has ablution and he has performed prayers, for example, and he wants to perform another prayer, it is a sunnah for him to perform the ablution. This kind of ablution does not leave any state of ritual impurity, because that particular person is in the state of tahara. So we say this is ala suratihima. It is like exactly performing any of wudu, but it does not lift any ritual impurity. So let me summarize again. Now we are speaking about the definition of tahara. What is the meaning of tahara? And as what I mentioned, this is the definition of Imam Nawawi. So there are a few things that is mentioned in this particular definition. Number one is raf'ul hadas, removing ritual and impurities, the two ritual impurities. Number two is izalatun najas, that is to cleanse ourselves from filth. Number three is awma fi ma'nahuma, that takes its position, meaning if in a state of emergency, whether you do tayammum or you perform wiping on the khuf for example, so it carries its meaning, although in reality it does not remove any ritual impurity, but this is something like a concession that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving. So this is part of the chapter of tahara. And lastly, it is about wasuratihima, and this is pertaining to the sunnahs of bathing and the sunnahs of renewing of wudu, and so on and so forth. So this is basically the explanation on the definition of tahara. So we have the definition of tahara in terms of the Arabic language, and we have the definition of tahara in terms of the Sharia. So what is important is to understand the definition in Sharia. Although this particular kitab does not speak about the definition, but it is important for us to come into an understanding what is the meaning of tahara. So this is the first part. So now inshallah ta'ala we will enter into this particular chapter, what is mentioned by the author. Continue. Now we go back into our notes.
Number one, the ruling of purification. It is not permissible, valid, to leave a state of ritual impurity or remove filth except with pure water.
This is the first sentence. So let us examine this particular sentence. The author is saying, وَلَا يَصِحُ رَفْعُ الْحَدَثِ وَلَا إِزَالَةُ النَّجَسِ إِلَّا بِمَا يُسَمَّى مَاءً. It is not permissible, valid, to leave a state of ritual impurity or remove filth except with pure water. That is mutlaq. So now we will go into explaining about the different types of water. For those who have studied, for example, books in your fiqh, like you have studied Risala Jami'ah or you studied Safinatun Najah, you will find that in the first chapter of Tahara, the author speaks about water. And water, basically there are four types. Number one, we have water that is pure and can purify others. It is itself and is pure and it can purify. This is what we call as mutlaq. Later I will explain inshallah. But basically when we say water that is mutlaq, there are two things. Number one, it is pure in itself and it can purify. Number two, we have water that is pure but cannot purify. It is pure, meaning it's not a filth, but it cannot purify. This is called musta'mal. This is called musta'mal. Number three, we have water that is not pure and cannot purify. This is called mutanajjis. Water that is mixed with filth. That's number three. Number four, we have water that is called mushammas. Mushammas, and in reality it is mutlaq, exactly like mutlaq, but it is placed under the sun. When the temperature is very hot in places that are hot, and it is placed in a container that is made of metallic compounds, then we say that this is mushammas. And mushammas is water that is pure and can purify, but it is makruh for us to use, because our ulama mentioned that there are certain enzymes that are that results from this exposure of the sun. So it is makruh to use mushammas. So basically there are four: mutlaq, musta'mal, mutanajjis, and mushammas. What we are more concerned, and here, as what the author is started off with, is speaking about the first one, that is ma al mutlaq. That is water that is pure and it can purify. So he says that it is not permissible to leave a state of ritual impurity. As what I mentioned earlier, I hope we can understand what is the meaning of lifting a state of ritual impurity. So ritual impurity, the word hadath, as what I mentioned, it is an imaginary thing that exists within ourselves. That once you perform any ablution, it is lifted away from you. It is lifted away from you. That is why our scholars come out with this term of lifting. Lifting. How do you lift a minor ritual impurity? By taking wudu. How do you lift a major ritual impurity? By performing the ghusl. By performing deep bathing with the intention. Then that ritual impurity is lifted upon you. So this is point number one. Point number two, he mentioned, or to remove a filth. To remove filth. So when there is a filth, for example, in our bodies or in our clothes, it is compulsory upon us to remove that particular filth. If you want to perform any prayers, for example, one of the conditions is that you must free from filth. So you have to clean yourself. You have to cleanse yourself from filth, whether it is on your body or on your clothes or at the place anywhere you are performing your prayers. And you can only do so by ma'ul mutlaq. Likewise, when you live a state of ritual impurity, you can only do so by water that is mutlaq. And water that is mutlaq is water that is pure, and it can purify. Now later we will give some examples inshallah. We continue first.
If the characteristic of taste, color, or odor of the water has changed drastically through the admixture, which is pure, which could have been avoided, it can no longer be used as for purification.
So now the author mentioned pertaining to the characteristics. We have the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that the Prophet mentioned water is pure. إلا ما تغير من طعمه أو ريحه أو لونه أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم mentioned water is tahur. The origin of water it is that it is pure and it can purify, unless if you find there are certain characteristics, and from three characteristics. Number one, it is a smell. Number two, it is the taste, and number three, it is the color. If any of these three characteristics change, that you see change within any water, and it is a drastic change when it comes into things that are not considered to be filth. If it is mixed with water, and it causes one of the characteristics of the three characteristics to change, now this is not considered to be mutlaq. This is not considered to be mutlaq. Although we say it is pure, but it cannot purify. So as an example, for example, if I have any water, imagine there is water in this particular cup. So what I do is I pour syrup inside, and then after that it becomes red in color. Initially it is pure water, meaning water that is not mixed with anything. Once I mix with something else, although it is not a filth, syrup, for example, it is something that is pure. I add it into this particular water, and it changes in color, or changes in terms of the taste, or in terms of the smell. If it changes, the change is drastic. Drastic meaning when you look at the water, you say it is not water anymore. It is syrup water. Now it becomes qaid. It is related to something else. We cannot be saying this is water. Now this particular, the ruling of using this particular water carries the ruling of musta'mal. That is water that is pure but cannot purify. It carries the ruling of musta'mal. Water that is musta'mal is water that cannot lift any state of ritual impurity, or cannot remove any filth, because although it is pure but it cannot purify. So now when we say that there is a transition that is occurred, the transition that is from mutlaq to musta'mal. How does this transition any occurs? By the changing of one of the characteristics any within water that is mutlaq. So he said that if the characteristics of taste, color or odor of the water, odor meaning smell, has changed drastically. So maybe any for those and you have the notes and you underline this, because there is a difference. Later on when we speak about najis or filth, there is a difference. So here the author is speaking about things that are pure. For example, water that is mixed with salt, water that is mixed with sugar, water that is mixed with coffee, water that is mixed with tea. Once it changes the color, or changes the smell, or changes any of the taste drastically. So what is the meaning of drastically? Drastically meaning when you look at that particular water, you cannot say it is water anymore. You see, if I take this cup, imagine in this cup, and I pour one drop of coffee. If I pour one drop of coffee, what will happen to the water in the cup? Do you think that that one drop of coffee will cause a drastic change in the characteristics of the water, or it does not cause any drastic change? The answer will be it does not cause a drastic change. Why? Because it is a little. Just one drop of coffee will not cause any drastic change. If it does not cause any drastic change, meaning when you look at the water, you still can see there is no changes in terms of the color, in terms of the taste. You still can say that it is water. But the moment if I pour half of this cup coffee, now the water becomes black in color. Now if a person asks you what is this, you cannot say this water because it's black in color. So you have to say this is coffee water. This is coffee water. Now it is tied into something else. So this term mutlaq, the meaning of mutlaq is not tied to anything. You see this term when we say water that is mutlaq, meaning water that is not tied to anything. Water that is not tied to anything. Because the Arabic language, when you say mutlaq is to make free, is to release. Just like for example, you release someone from chains, you say atlaqtuhu, I release him. So he is mutlaq. He is mutlaq, he is freed. So when you say water is mutlaq, meaning what? Water is not binded with anything else. It is just pure water, just water. How does this purity of water becomes tied to something else? How can it happen? The moment you add something into it. Correct or not? Just like the example I gave earlier, the moment I place in coffee into the water, now it is not mutlaq anymore. It is not considered to be mutlaq. It is muqayyad. In Arabic we call it muqayyad. It is the opposite of mutlaq. Mutlaq is to make free. Muqayyad is to attach something to it. Now it is attached to something else. It is coffee, water, rose, water, syrup, water, tea, water. So the water is binded to something else. So when you bind the term water to something else and you say this is juice water or coffee water or tea water, this is called muqayyad. So the water has lost its mutlaq. We say the water has lost its freedom of usage, as freedom of usage, meaning you cannot use the term pure water anymore, but it is binded into something else because it is mixed with something else, or one of the characteristics has changed. So it is important to understand this terminology, the terminology of mutlaq and the terminology of muqayyad. So mutlaq is pure water, muqayyad is water that is attached to something else. So this is what he said. Water has changed drastically through admixture to something that is mixed. So there is a difference between pouring something into water. There are certain things that can mix with water. There are certain things that cannot mix with water. So for example, if you pour sugar into water, now this is something that can mix with water. So in Arabic we call it mukhalit, because it can mix. There is another terminology, we call it mujawir. Something that if you put in water, it does not mix any with water. For example, if I put wood inside, imagine
Dissolve.
dissolve, something that can dissolve in water, that's mukhalid. This water, now if I put any metal inside, or I put any wood inside, does the wood or the metal dissolve any with the water? It does not dissolve. We call it mujawir. This does not give any effect. But the thing that gives effect is admixture. That's what we mentioned here. It is admixture. That's why the author mentioned bihaisu la yusamma ma'an mutlaqan. It does not becomes any ma'al mutlaq anymore, because why? The freedom of usage of the terminology of water is binded into something else. Why? Because it is mixed with mukhalit. Mukhalit it is a mixture that mixes with water, that dissolves within water. And he said bi mukhalitin tahirin, with an mixture that is pure. After this, inshallah ta'ala, we will speak about an mixture that is a filth. So there is a difference between something that is pure, that mixes with water, and something that is a filth that mixes with water. So when it comes to something that is pure, that mixes with water, in order for us to say that it is no more mutlaq, it must be a drastic change. The change must be drastic. One of the characteristics must drastically be changed. But if it is not drastically changed, there is a slight change, the water still maintains its mutlaq. The water still maintains its mutlaq. Different pertaining to filth. Because when it comes to filth, even a drop of filth that enters into water that is a little, it becomes mutanajis automatically. Even though none of the characteristics change. Now when we go back, to our notes. So I hope it's clear, inshallah.
Estimated change of...
Wait, hold on. The author mentioned, water has changed drastically to admixture which is pure. Clear, inshallah. So meaning it is not a filth. Something that mixes with water. Which could have been avoided. This is another thing. There are certain things, for example, that cannot be avoided. Meaning that if you have a pail of water, or you have whether we are speaking about a pail or a container and so on, there are certain things that cannot be avoided. For example, if you leave any water for many months, what happens? There will be algae. The algae is mixed with the water. This is forgiven. Forgiven. Likewise, if you have water, for example, under a tree, and then after some time, the leaves of the tree fell into the water, and then caused some change in any of the characteristics of the water, this is forgiven. So this is what he meant by it cannot be avoided. If it is something that cannot be avoided, meaning there is nothing you can do for the change that occurs, that is forgiven. Certain situation, it is forgiven in Islam. But if you can avoid then it is not forgiven. For example, if a person take a lot of leaves, for example, dry leaves, and then he pour into a pail of water, for example, to such an extent it causes a drastic change, this is not forgiven. Because why? Because this is intentionally. A person does it intentionally. When does we say it is forgiven? If naturally it fell into the water, and it is something that difficult for you to maintain. If you have a well, for example, or you have like a reservoir, a small reservoir, for example, and there's a lot of leaves that fall, and sometimes any animal enters into it, and animal drink from the water and so on. At certain times, and you see there is a change in the characteristics of the water. This is forgiven. Likewise, pertaining to containers, if you use a clay container that is made of clay, and you place the water, and you place it, for example, 1 month or 2 months, after some time the water will turn whitish. This is also forgiven. Because why? This is something that cannot be avoided. So there are certain situations that are forgiven. But if it can be avoided, and the characteristics change, this is the thing that the author mentioned, it is not forgiven, he said, Lam yasihha taharatu bihi. Lam tasihha taharatu bihi. It is not valid for purification. If a person use water that has changed, meaning one of the characteristics has changed, and there is no concession pertaining to this particular thing. It is not something that cannot be avoided. It can be avoided, but he does something to the water that makes the water change in one of the characteristics. So in this particular situation, we say it is not permissible to use that particular water, because why? Because one of the characteristics, or all of the characteristics, the three characteristics have changed. So I hope it is clear, inshallah. Right, continue.
Estimated change of the characteristic taste, color, and odor carry the same ruling as the obvious change.
Now, the author speaks about estimated changes. He say carry the same ruling as the obvious changes. What is the meaning of an estimated change? The meaning is this. Imagine you have a pail of water, and this is something that is considered to be a small amount of water. See, in fiqh we differentiate between small amount and large amount. Anything that is less than what you call it, than 2 qulla, we say this is a small amount of water. It is about anything that is less than 219 or 220 liters. We say this is a small amount of water. So here we are speaking about a small amount of water. So if something fell into a small amount of water and it does not cause any change, for example, you have rose water that the scent of the rose water, the smell of the rose water has that there is no more smell, no more taste, but it is rose water. It fell into a pail of water. So we cannot be saying that the characteristics does not change. But here we have to do an estimation. Although we say that the characteristics of the small amount of water does not change, but due to the fact that we know that something has dropped into that pail of water, and this is something that is pure, so we have to give an estimation. If this particular water has a smell or it has a taste, for example, like juices of orange or juices of grapes, we make an estimation. If we were to take the place of that rose water that has no smell with something that has a smell, will it change the characteristics of the water, or it does not change? So this is what the author is saying. The estimated changes carry the same ruling as the obvious changes. Obvious changes meaning you can see the changes in the characteristics. You can smell, for example. You can smell, or you can taste, or you can see the color. This is Alhamdulillah. This is an obvious change. You can see, you can taste, you can smell. This is an example of an obvious change. Whereas an estimated change is something that you cannot see. It's something that you cannot see, but you make an estimation. If it is for many things that is obvious, does this will change the characteristics of the water or does not change? So he will give an example. Now we look at the example for us to understand. Aywa, continue.
For example, if nonsense rose water were to get mixed with pure water, then an intermediary estimation will be used as benchmark.
So now he gave an example of a rose water. What did he say? He said that if the rose water fell into the small amount of water. Now you have rose water non-scented rose water, meaning there is no smell, there is no taste, and there is no color, but it is rose water. It is not any water. Now it enters into a small amount of water. So now we have to make an estimation. We have to make an estimation. So estimation in this particular chapter, there are two types of estimation. Number one, we have to have it is called awsatu sifat. Number two, it is called ashaddu sifat. Basically, in English, we say it is a minor estimation. As for the ashaddu sifat, we say it is a major. It is a major estimation. So you need to write this down. So for those who have pen and paper with you, number one, it is minor estimation. Inshallah, we write this down. Then inshallah, I will explain again. So you write this down. Minor estimation and major estimation. So for minor estimation, you write this down. The taste of pomegranate. The taste of pomegranate. And the color of juices. Asir. And number three, the smell of frankincense. So can we write this down? Number one is what? Number one is the taste of pomegranate. And then we have the color of juice. And pertaining to the smell, it is the smell of frankincense. Now the example is this. Let me use this cup as my example. This small cup. Now for example, 5 drops of non-scented rose water falls into this cup. There's water in this cup. A few drops of rose water fell inside, non-scented, meaning no color, no smell, no taste, but rose water. So now we have to give an estimation. The estimation that we'll do is a minor estimation. Why minor estimation? The reason is the thing that falls into this cup is pure. Rose water is not filled. It's pure. So since it is a pure, so we give a minor estimation. This is what we meant by awsatu sifat. So a minor estimation, as what I mentioned, the three things. Any of the three things. So for example, if I want to use the smell of the frankincense, or what you call it, the color of the juice, or the taste the taste of frankincense, or the color of the juice, and the what's the other one? No. The first one is the taste of the pomegranate. So imagine the juice of the pomegranate, and it falls into the water. The juice of the pomegranate, and it falls into the water. Does it will change? Does it change the characteristics of the water, or it does not change? If you were to say, for example, 3 drops of pomegranate, the juice of the pomegranate falls into the water, will it change the characteristics of the water, or does not change? So if it change, now we say this is not mutlaq anymore. This is not any mutlaq anymore. Because why? We have given an estimated, a minor form of estimation to the rose water, the non-scented rose water that fell into this particular cup. So I hope it is clear, inshallah. So this is the meaning of an estimation. Since it is something that is pure, so we use a minor form of estimation. So I hope it is clear, inshallah. So now, mashallah, yani we have come to 45 minutes any of our class. I think we will stop here, inshallah, because the next part is a new sentence. So I hope it is clear, inshallah. So now I will take in question. If there is anything, mashallah, if you do not understand, based on what I mentioned earlier, we spoke about. Let me summarize what we spoke about in this class. In Muqaddimah Hadramiyyah, we spoke about the definition of tahara in terms of the Arabic language and in terms of the Sharia. We spoke about the meaning of hadas, and we mentioned that one of the major part in tahara is to remove impurities, rafu hadas. The second part is izalatun najas, yani to cleanse ourselves from filth, and then also the things that has relation to it. And then the author speaks about water. So we mentioned about ma'un mutlaq, water that is mutlaq, musta'mal, mutanajjis, mushammas, the four types of water. And then we spoke about mutlaq. What is the meaning of mutlaq? What is the meaning of muqayyad? And how does water that is mutlaq becomes muqayyad? How does it becomes so when something which is pure that mixes with the water, admixture? We spoke about admixture, mukhalit. So how do we ascertain that it remains in states of mutlaq, or it does not remains in the state of mutlaq? We spoke about the characteristics in terms of the smell, in terms of the color, in terms of the taste. And then we spoke about an estimated minor change. That if a non-scented rose water fell into the cup, how do we make this estimation? This estimation. So we have awsatu sifat and we have ashadu sifat. Just now when we spoke about awsatu sifat, and the meaning of awsatu sifat is pertaining to things that are pure, that comes and mixes with water. Then we go back to awsatu sifat. That is the color, the taste of the pomegranate, the color of juice, and the smell of the frankincense. We take these things as our medium of estimation to ascertain whether this particular water is mutlaq or not, and considered to be mutlaq. So basically this is the summary. So is there any questions so far? Also, if you can ask about the adab sulukil murid that we covered today. Check the WhatsApp group. Is there any question? You see, the thing about live session is that you can ask question. Once this live session is finished, and if you listen to the recorded session, there is no what you call interaction basically. So we have now one question. Question is asking, it is said you have to be pure to touch the Quran. How true is this statement, and does that mean you must always leave the ritual impurity before touching any of the Quran? Question is asking pertaining to the touching any of the Quran. Yes, you must be in a state of purification if you want to touch the Quran. This is based on the verse in Surah Al-Waqi'ah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned, La yamassuhu illa al-mutahharun. Nobody can touch the Quran except in a state of tahara. The meaning is, in the Madhab Imam Shafi, especially, it is not permissible for a person who is in a state of ritual impurity, whether you are in a state of minor ritual impurity or major ritual impurity, you cannot touch the Quran. So you must take wudu. You must leave that impurity. Once you become in a state of purity, in a sense that the hadas is lifted upon you, then only you can touch. Then only you can touch the Quran. I hope that answers the question. Is there any other question? From the group? So if there is no other question, inshallah, we stop with our class by reciting Surah Al-Fatiha. Ila hadratin Nabi Muhammadin sallallahu alaihi wasallam al-Fatiha. ربنا تقبل معنا إنك أنت وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم واختم بالصالحات أعمالنا وآجلنا الله يكرم فضل سبحان ربك بالعزة عما يصفون سلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين تقبل الله منكم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته